Welcome to our next build. This is going to be a furniture build. We're building a storage cabinet that stands 5 feet tall, 2 feet wide, 1 foot deep. It has glass doors so you can see what's inside. And on the inside we have 2 adjustable shelves and 1 fixed shelf. The back of the cabinet is shiplapped, and we did make our own shiplap for this, and that is actually where we're going to start in the build process. We've taken the soil, we've put a sacrificial fence with a dado blade. I've set the depth to about 5/16 of an inch because the shiplap is 5/8 thick. So we're trying to go about half of that distance. And I'm using a test piece to check my depth. I don't want to go too deep. I don't want to go too shallow. The shiplap has to overlap. First pass, it was a little bit short, so I'm readjusting the depth and I'm making a pass. This groove needs to be 3/4 of an inch wide, so we'll eventually move the fence and make a second cut out to make it a full 3/4 wide. But here I am with the actual shiplap material, 5/8 thick. We're going to pass one side of each board face down to get a nice groove on that side. But we then need to flip the board over and put the same groove on the other side so the boards can interlock properly. And always test your depth as you go along. You don't want to have to go back and fix that later. What I want to do is I want to put an angle on the front of each board where the boards intersect. So I'm putting a 45-degree bevel cut at the end of the front of the overlapping tongue of the shiplap. I'm going to do the same thing on the inside of the groove of the top side, on the opposite side of this board, in the groove, and that will give us a bevel that faces in when the two boards come together. The trick to making this is you need to make sure your depth of your cut doesn't cut through the tongue or even into the tongue. So we set up so that the blade will cut down to the tongue, and then we're going to run the boards through. Again, both of these bevel cuts are with the board face down. There's no need to put a bevel cut on the back. There's no decorative purpose for it. Unless you're going to see the back, in that case, you might want to do it. But now, once we've cut the bevel cuts in all 4 of our pieces, we're just going to use a couple of planes, a rabbeting block plane and a shoulder plane to kind of bring that bevel cut in line with the groove so that it looks good. It just takes a little bit of effort with the plane to bring it into a nice smooth transition. And there we go. We have our 4 boards for the back. Right now they're a little over the 24 inches we need. We'll actually need a little under 24 inches, but we'll fit those up later on once we get the cabinet glued up. Now what we're doing is we're taking the sides and the shelves and we're ripping them to width. The sides and the top and bottom panels need to be ripped to 12 inches. The shelves will need to be 5/8 less than that to account for the shiplap being 5/8 thick. We're cross-cutting the sides and the shelves using the cross-cut sled. I'm just making one side of the sides 90 degrees. The top, bottom, and the 3 shelves are all going to be cut to width. And once I get one edge cut at 90 degrees, I'm able to flip the board over, measure the width using the fence, and then just cut it to length. This enables me to make the top, bottom, and middle shelf the exact same width. They'll glue into dado and rabbets. The shelves will need to be slightly narrower so that they fit into the cabinet once it's glued together. I won't do the shelves until we're closer to the time of assembly. For the sides, what I've done is I've clamped the sides together, and I'm using a track saw to cut them to the same length. We do both sides. One side is to make it square, and the other side is to cut them to final. Track saw is a great tool for doing this type of work. You could use a handheld circular saw with some kind of a straight edge. What I'm doing now is I'm marking off 2 rabbets that are going to be on each end of the inside of the cabinet to hold the top and bottom, and the dado that will be used in the middle to hold the fixed shelf. I've taken a piece of scrap wood, I've taken a guide, and I've made a groove in the scrap wood. And what I'm doing now is I'm measuring from the guide to the top edge of the dado to know where I need to place the guide on my piece. And it was 2.5 inches. I'm using a 3/4 inch straight bit in the router, and with the 2.5 inches plus 3/4 of an inch is where I set the guide. And then I'm going to cut across each one. I've put a guide at each location. That way I can do it in steps, and I make sure that all of my rabbets and dados are the exact same depth. So when I put the cabinet together, it's a better chance of being square right off the bat. So I made a single pass on each of the 3, and I'm making my next pass. And again, I've still got my boards clamped together. I start off with a climb cut on the far side, and what this does is this helps keep the router bit from chipping out when it exits the board. You could also clamp on a sacrificial piece, but this method works fairly well. The next step is to put a guide in place, and we're going to route the groove for the shiplap. It's 5/8. It's going to be a 5/8 inch wide groove, 3/8 of an inch deep, which is half the thickness of the side. I've set up my straight edge, and this time it's 2.5 inches, but it's only plus 5/8 because the groove is 5/8 wide. Again, I did my climb cut on the end, and I'm moving my way down the board. I've also got to put a 5/8 inch groove into the top and bottom panel. So again, set up my straight edge and run the groove. Again, this is done in multiple passes. Now we need to drill shelf pin holes. It's a lot easier to do it before we assemble a cabinet. So I'm going to use my shelf pin drilling guide. I've lined it up with the dado at the bottom of the cabinet. There are guides on the side of the template so that it spaces it from the edge, and then we just drill where the starter hole where we want to start it, and you just go into each hole. This is a special shelf pin bit. It fits the hole and drills the hole in the middle for our 1/4 inch shelf pins. When I have to move the guide, what's really wonderful about this guide from Woodcraft is that I just line it up with the edge, and I take a guide pin and I insert it into one of the holes I already drilled through the template. And what that does is that makes sure all of my holes going on up the side are evenly spaced. And I'm going to do this on both sides of each side. So there's going to be a total of 4 sections on each panel of shelf pin holes. For the other side, we just flip it around, line it up with the same location, the edge of the dado, and proceed. This template is completely reversible, and so as long as I've got it lined up at the same point, all of my holes line up and my shelves are even. Now it's time to glue up the cabinet. What I like to do is fit everything into place, and I use painter's tape around the edges. This will help if there's any glue squeeze out. Once we glue the cabinet together, it's much easier to clean that up than to try to get into that corner and remove glue. So I usually try to use painter's tape. I've also drawn a line across the center of each groove and dado in the sides. I'm going to reinforce my connection with screws. So I'm drilling a hole for a number 8 screw. It also has a countersink on it, so the countersink will go in. It'll countersink the screw and leave enough space for me to put in a wooden plug once I've got the cabinet assembled. I'm putting 4 screws on in each joint. Should be good enough to hold it. The nice thing is it also helps while the glue is drying. So I'm going to take some glue, put it in the dado, put it in the rabbets, set the piece into the groove and fit it. Then we'll drive the screws into the pre-drilled holes. And that'll hold our cabinet together. The cabinet is now all glued up. The screws have been installed, and it's nice and square, and because of the screws I could take the clamps out. Thanks for watching. In the next video we will finish the shiplap and we will put the doors together.